Hello and welcome to the birth of a new dimension. My name is Aurora. I have called this radio show The Birth of a New Dimension because it is all about preparing the mentality and the consciousness of Earth's surface humans for the impending creation or unveiling of literally what is a new space, a new place that we may occupy. And I'm going to describe that space to you now. So the backstory for this is duality, the idea and the concept of separation of consciousness, thing versus thing, self versus other, matter versus spirit, consciousness versus the world or the context within which that consciousness operates. And all of that duality is a story that is a fiction. It's not empirical truth. However, it is programmed in on such a profound level that it is taken as truth. The flying rainbow lasagna, if you are new to this broadcast and new to my work and what the flying rainbow lasagna is, please refer to the Birth of a New Dimension homepage where you can access the Twitter feed or go directly to Twitter at Birth Dimension. You can also go to flyingrainbowlasagna.com and look at actual images of the flying rainbow lasagna, which is a type of hypertorus. It is a higher dimensional shape that I invented. And that is like saying the first time a triangle was ever created, or the first time a square was ever created. I took a torus or a donut shape and turned it into a flying rainbow lasagna. And I did so by adding an additional dimension, and in math terms, when we do that, we add an additional degree of freedom. And a good way to signify this, if you are an occupant of the third dimension, it's very easy for you to understand if you can envision a little ant walking across the surface of a piece of paper. The ant is stuck to the piece of paper. It cannot just jump up several inches. It is in the second dimension. It's stuck to the plane of the paper. However, if you can give the little ant wings and it can jump off of the surface of the paper, it has gained the third dimension. A butterfly or a fly doesn't have to walk all the way across the surface of the paper. It can just use its little wings and jump on up and just fly to the other edge. Another way of gaining another dimension and gaining another degree of freedom would be to fold the piece of paper. If we folded the distant edges so that they touched, the little ant could be the laziest ant in the world, wouldn't have to walk one step, and it would still be able to reach its destination. This is how gaining an additional dimension gives us an additional degree of freedom. We are familiar with visually perceiving the second dimension and the third dimension. Now we are speaking about gaining another dimension in the higher dimensional reality. And when I say higher, I mean higher than the fourth dimension. And when I say the fourth dimension, I'm going to define terms right now. So I've done this on other broadcasts. However, it's so important to make sure that we're all using the same language, and we're all on the same page. So the 0th dimension is infinity, or the singularity, or the presence of all possibilities and probabilities and time structures overlapping on top of one another. And science describes that structure as existing at the center of a black hole. That's where the rules of math and physics that science has derived no longer make sense. The calculations break down at that place. And that's the 0th dimension. It's the source. It's why we always start with this conversation at 0. And it's also the destination. So we derive our consciousness from 0, and the first time that there is any traveling from that dimension, we create the first dimension, which is a line. And then if we stack up a bunch of lines next to one another, we get a flat plane, like the little ant that had to walk across a piece of paper. And if you stack up enough sheets of paper, you get a cube, and that's the third dimension. And people say, we're living in the third dimension. That would be accurate if you never moved. However, you are not a static object, merely occupying the third dimension. You are also a time-based organism. You move through time. So that means that this morning you got up, you were in the moment of 6:59. Then you went across the flat two-dimensional surface of the piece of paper known as time that you're experiencing, and eventually made it to whatever. It is now the moment of 12:14 p.m., and that is the box that we are occupying. And we have moved our consciousness through all of the intervening integumentary boxes or moments from this morning to this moment now. So each one of those moments or third dimensional boxes that you occupied is the fourth dimension. And the fourth dimension would be envisioned as a timeline. And this is the point, line, plane method or template of understanding and building reality. We've just moved back to a first dimension, the line. And so you have a timeline. If we stack up many timelines next to one another, we have a time plane. And that is analogous to the fifth dimension. So the fifth dimension, it doesn't just mean that a person is enlightened or has become a better person somehow. A fifth dimensional being, if we're being impeccable with our language, would literally be a being that does not occupy the world of flesh and blood and organic life experiences, and does occupy a higher dimensional perspective and space wherein one would be able to perceive probabilities that have not yet coalesced into timelines that can be experienced. So this is the idea of living in a world of pure probabilities. At that level, consciousness does not have a body as a flesh and blood, dense body. Consciousness does have one. And there's no better or worse in terms of position. There are different movements and amounts of power that are available from each different position. So if you're a higher dimensional being, like the fifth dimension and up, if you want to get something done in the denser realms, you have to actually occupy the denser realms. You can't just be, quote unquote, looking at it from up above. So the difference between these two realms, the fifth dimension and higher, that's like looking at the musical score of the cosmos and being submerged in time, as you and I are, and I presume that my listening audience are organic multicellular beings that are submerged in time. If you're experiencing time, it is like you are a musician actually playing the notes of the musical score, or an audience member as those notes flow over you as you experience the music. And musicians and audience members can have experiences that would not be open or accessible to a person who is merely looking at the dots of music that are written on the musical score. That is a level of abstraction and potential as opposed to the level of a submerged experience. If you want to make something happen in the denser realms, you have to get submerged. You have to, quote unquote, get an instrument. That's called getting a body, and go into the physical realm and actually begin to play music or have life experiences with the instrument that contains your consciousness. And I'm speaking from personal life experience here because I am a walk-in. So I could not merely accomplish my objectives by maintaining consciousness on an abstract level and being at the higher dimensional, less dense realms. If I wanted to have an impact on the denser realms, I had to actually come here, get a body, and learn how to flap my moving mouth parts and vibrate the atmosphere around me to make sounds that other people would interpret as intelligent conversation, and other things too, you know? So this is the idea that what are higher dimensional beings like? Because the birth of a new dimension is a coming together of beings from less dense realms and beings from more dense realms. it has been an artificial sense of separation. This is the same or similar, analogous artificial sense of separation that is the duality of light versus dark, good versus evil, or even self versus other. So the flying rainbow lasagna is literally a shape, or the shape, that resolves duality. If duality is a complex word problem offered to us by the, exam curator of the cosmos, then the flying rainbow lasagna is the succinct, visual, or graphic answer to that problem. And the complex word problem of duality is programmed into our biology and affects our perception on a deep foundation level. We perceive the world primarily through our visual perception. However, we also have auditory perception, and we have 2 eyes, and we have 2 ears. And mostly our mode of perception involves comparing thing versus thing. So with the 2 eyes that we have, the right eye and left eye perceive slightly different views of reality. They're separated by about 3 inches or so. And our brain and system of perception cunningly calculates the difference between these 2 snapshots of reality and then combines them into one totality, the picture that we call the world around us. This is our system of interpretation. So the raw data that comes out of your eyeballs and comes down your optic nerves has to be knitted together into a sense of the 3-dimensional reality, the room that you're sitting in, the trees or cat or wall that you're looking at. And that perception is based in duality. This thing versus this thing. Now let's contrast this with a different form of biological perception, the insect realm. If you look at the eye of a bee, like a bumblebee, it is a composite eye. It functions differently than our own eyes. A composite eye has several hundred, almost mosaic-like tiles that fit together. The bee uses the bee's system of perception to weave together those hundreds of tiny little flashes or tiles into a totality of experience. And bees also have less of an individuated mind. They have literally a hive mind. So their biology and their perception programs them less for duality than human biology and perception. There's no right and no wrong. There's just being aware of how the body that you're wearing is literally affecting or coloring what you are able to perceive. As soon as you understand that, that's like the critical enzyme that you need in order to unlock the experience. It's like understanding your cultural filter. If you come from France, then you have probably been programmed with a cultural filter that wine is an important part of, each meal, and that the right wine must be consumed with the right food. And if you go to a different culture that does not care about wine, then you can compare your own priorities to the priorities of another person with a different cultural filter. So there's no right and no wrong. It's not like something is or isn't the right thing to ingest. It's just your perspective. So your current perspective is heavily programmed by the biological body that you wear, which is programmed for duality. Let's also talk about the inception of the ego. The ego is not a naturally occurring substance. The ego is a compensatory mode that has been developed so that one can function in reality in much the same way that you use probiotics like gut bacteria to digest solid objects and make their nourishment available to you. It is a repurposing of your physical structures in your body, and your ego is a repurposing of the energetic and consciousness and perceptual structures of your body. And the body, in this term, we are defining it not just as the physical, but as the total body, including your non-physical or emotional and spiritual aspects. Because the flying rainbow lasagna is the tool that we use to seamlessly combine the physical aspects of self and the temporal aspects of self, or what we fit, the story that we tell ourselves because we are submerged in time, with the non-physical, non-temporal aspects of self. These two aspects of self have been artificially separated. When humans are first born, their infantile consciousness, before it is programmed with the human operating system, which I have described as being a hacked operating system, little babies in their first year, they are still connected to the totality consciousness, or the numinous meaning connected to everything consciousness, the galactic consciousness that is who we really are, the source of where we really come from. We are really members of an undifferentiated network of consciousness. If I use the word hive mind, you probably have a negative connotation because of totalitarian regimes like, the communist regime of Joseph Stalin, or some extremely against freedom political system that does not allow for individuated thought. That's not what I'm talking about. When I talk about this network of consciousness, which is really the stellar network of consciousness that is unperturbed, when something is flowing without friction and without interpretation, it is unperturbed. We're talking about empirical, abstract energy, consciousness impulses. That is the network of consciousness that is the totality. And little tiny 1-year-old infants who haven't yet learned to organize their human neurology into verbalized thought or verbalized linguistic expression, those little babies are still connected to the stellar network. It's not just babies. Any one of us can reconnect to that stellar network if we simply press pause on the daily, waking, conscious mind of constant verbalization. We can do that through meditation and mindfulness and breathing techniques and yoga and the ingestion of certain entheogenic or psychedelic plants. The key is pressing pause on the words. I'm not the first person to put forth the idea that language is a virus or an implanted mental structure that does not necessarily have the best interests of its host at heart or at mind. Language and viruses, they just want to continue onward. They just want to make sure that you keep them alive and that they can siphon off as much energy as they need to maintain their own status quo. And that is really what's going on here. Language was intended as a good workaround, a compensatory mode for the loss of our telepathic abilities. And the loss of telepathic abilities, or what I call the higher faculties, higher meaning anything above the level of the heart and unconditional love, because the higher faculties sit upon the foundation of unconditional love, just like a capstone of the pyramid sits on the foundation and the center portions of the pyramid. So our challenge in creating the non-physical energy structure of our body is, you start with red. Red is the foundation. This is the physical body. And our physical bodies have emotions. And our physical bodies have the conscious daily waking intellect that is known as our human mind. And those things are like the lower foundation of the pyramid. You have a body and mammalian emotions and a mind that makes it all walk around. And then up from there, you have the heart and unconditional love, which is literally a tone or the result of an energetic frequency that is the equal sharing of energy. If you send out 2 units of energy and you receive 2 units of energy, that is unconditional love. And when we apply it to time, it is the idea that you are submerged within time, experiencing the present moment of the now, not clinging to the past or grasping for the future, because those two activities mean if you're given 2 units of time, if you grasp at the past or grasp at the future, you're actually experiencing a small amount of friction. And then you're not sending back 2 units of time. You're sending back maybe 1.5 units of time. Your energy broadcast has been slightly diminished, or you have experienced entropy, the loss of energy from a system. And in this case, the energy is consciousness. So the sun or the stars, the stellar network, gave you consciousness, gave you perception, like the capacity to perceive with your 5 senses, and gave you photons and tactile stimulation and all of that. You're sitting here in the moment of now. If you're not ingesting and focusing on all of that information and reflecting it back to the stellar network, you are experiencing entropy. If you're not paying attention to your senses, like information is entering your ears, but you're not really listening, energy is stimulating the tiny hairs in the cochlea of your ears, but it's not creating cognition. It's not creating understanding. And you're not aware of what you're hearing. And that means that you can't broadcast what you're hearing back to the sun or the stellar network. And that means the stellar network doesn't know what you are hearing. And that's called entropy. And that it's the result of perturbations of the field of awareness. So the field of awareness should be, ideally, like a perfectly clear, still pool of water. And it should have no shadows and no reflections, and any light that comes into that pool of water should just travel through it seamlessly. However, verbalized conscious thought creates perturbations. These are like the little wavelets in a pool of standing water, and whenever light enters into the water, the little wavelets make the light bounce all over, and it creates shadows, and it creates entropy or loss of energy. It's slowing down the light in little ways. So our beings, the totality of our beings, we're like a pool of water, and we're meant to be in perfect alignment with the stellar cognitive network. And if we are, and we're not perturbed, then the energy that flows through us seamlessly and returns to the source. However, this hacked human operating system means that most of us are highly perturbed. Mostly from the age of 1, we are taught to have this conscious, verbalized, waking mind, and we're given the capacity to think and speak, but not the capacity to stop thinking and stop speaking, even for a few moments, which is what meditation is. This is all changing because I recorded a YouTube video called Meditation for Young People, and I've been speaking more about the importance of teaching young people, like people who are teenagers or under the age of 10, how to pause the mind, how to sit quietly and take 20 minutes a day of no thought, of not identifying with the thought part of ourself in order to contact the higher, non-thinking, but perceiving in a different manner part of ourself. Since I've been speaking about this, I have seen 2 excellent articles, one about the San Francisco school system, one about the school system in Great Britain, that more and more in the Western industrialized world, meditation and mindfulness are being introduced into the school curriculum. And it is already much more accepted and more a part of the curriculum of young people in the Far East, places like Thailand. And that's a place where people under the age of 10 are more likely to enter into a monastery or a formalized mind and consciousness training regime because it is more part of the culture. And the whole point is, oh my goodness, we wouldn't wait until we are 18 years old to learn how to brush our teeth. We would teach that to young people as they're growing up. And why would we wait until a person is 18 years old or older in order to teach them something like the mental and energetic hygiene of meditation and mindfulness? And meditation and mindfulness are hygienic in the sense that they give us a small amount of perspective from emotional reactivity. That we are stimulated all the time by experiences and things that come in through our senses and emotional experiences. And that It's just like you need to digest food. If you eat a sandwich, you then need several hours or maybe even a full day to digest the nourishment of that sandwich and let the parts of it that do not serve you pass out the other end. It is the same with life experiences. We are here to have experiences and to refine the experiences into a type of food for higher consciousness called life experience or wisdom. And when we are here, if I'm ingesting light or sound or tactile information, I need to process that just the same way I need to process a sandwich through my intestines. If someone speaks to me, I need to process what is spoken to me. If someone says, "Hey, Aurora, you look pretty today," I get to process the emotions that come from that conversation. And if someone says to me, "Hey, Aurora, you look ugly today," I also get to process the emotions that come from that interaction. And if you're a human on the surface of Earth, you have a pretty good idea that there are two very different sets of emotional reactions from those two conversations. So every single thing that we're being exposed to, we need to process and send it back to the source, which is the being that dreamed it all up and gave it to us. And the time period of processing it, it can be instantaneous. If someone says to me, "Hey, Aurora, you're looking really ugly today," and I say, "Hey, screw you, stuff it," I feel like I've processed that emotional experience pretty quickly and sent back the energy that needed to be sent back. If you don't have a chance to process it, if it comes inside of you and you don't get a chance to respond, then it's still in there. It means that then when I have quiet time alone, like I'm walking down the road or driving my car, I might think, "Hey, what did so-and-so mean when they said, 'Hey, Aurora, you're looking really ugly today?' Like, that's staying inside of me. What did they mean? I have to think about this." And as I think about it, I'm mentally processing it and emotionally processing it. And cardiovascular exercise can literally help us to process emotional experiences more quickly. As you are breathing in, oxygen is an element of transformation. That is what caloric burning is. That burning is oxygenating something. You're using oxygen to unlock the energy of an experience. When you breathe in, you're using oxygen to unlock the caloric experiences that you have had throughout the day. And breath can be used to cleanse or purge negative emotional experiences too. This is recapitulation, or the idea that with conscious breathing, you can breathe in aspects of your soul or spirit or consciousness that have been left behind through traumatic or undigested experiences. And you can also purge or breathe out the residues that were inside of you. So if someone says to you, "Hey, you're looking very ugly today," it probably gives a negative emotional response. And then you have to process that emotional response. And the breathing out is when you would be letting go of that negative emotional response. And this is all highly didactic to a giant ball of, gases and processes in the sun. This is not just an emitter of light. It's a being that's having dreams, and we are the dreamers of its dream, and it wants to know about our life experiences so that it can learn. So it's highly didactic for the sun and the stellar network to learn this is what it's like when someone insults you by saying, "Hey, you are an ugly person. This is what it feels like." And if you transmit it in real time, the sun will even broadcast back to you the patch code that you need, the comeback, or whatever you need to rectify, because a true tone of unconditional love is an equal giving and receiving. So if someone gives you 2 units of energy that says, "You are looking ugly today," you get to give them back the appropriate 2 units of energy that they have given to you, which might be like saying, "Stuff it, screw you, and get away from me." And it's different and unique to each situation. And it is the anthropomorphic filter that gives us the actual script or vocabulary words that these abstract impulses are translated into. So the abstract impulse would be a sending away or a pushing away of the insulting energy, and it would be translated through the anthropomorphic filter and the human operating system as the particular phrase that would be appropriate in that situation. Okay. let's bring all of this around to the cellular structure of your physical body. Because inside of your body, you have cells, and the cells have this cell membrane, and that is like the skin of the cell. In your physical body, you're familiar with your skin, your epidermis. This is the outer boundary, or how we define self versus other. So it's not just that we have two eyes, left eye versus right eye, and that's how we perceive the world, by the minute calculated differences between our two eyes, or between our two ears if you're a person who doesn't have sight and you rely on your ears. We also divide the world according to our skin, because we are organisms that have skin. If we are organisms that were made out of cloud, we would have a different thought structure and perception structure and social structure. So just understanding that this is the cultural paradigm that is giving you a lot of your whole way of perceiving our skin, and being a tiny infant and beginning to learn the difference between you and not you. So when you're a little tiny infant, mostly this is when this level of development happens. You touch your face, or you touch your leg, and you say, I feel that. You touch the crib or you touch the wall, and you say, I don't feel that. You touch another person, and you don't feel that. Or you touch a dog or a cat, and you say, I don't feel that. Therefore, that is not me. These are effective distinctions to make in terms of navigating the world on a moment-to-moment microcosmic level. Because, like for example, I may walk in, when I first came in, I experienced the numinous connection to the totality and not individuated ego consciousness until I developed my ego. So I learned how it's not efficacious to navigate reality by looking at everything as literally as if it is an aspect of your own self. Because it's like you wouldn't be able to eat a cabbage, because you'd be like, but wait, I don't want to, bite myself. I don't want to bite a carrot. That's me. Why would I want to hurt it with my teeth? So in order to have a body, we have to individuate. In order to have a body and eat, we have to make a distinction between self and other. This is me. This is what I define as me. And everything else that's not me is something that I can eat. And when I eat it, I grind it up into pieces and I put it inside of me and I turn it into me. So if we were to really look at the world, we see that we are a flow of energy, or a continuum of energy. That's what our metabolic processes are. And everything has metabolism, energy flowing in, energy flowing out. The sun has energetic metabolism. Our planet has energetic metabolism. Our mind has energetic metabolism. And it is all about the balance of what is flowing in and what is flowing out. It is a useful distinction to say, this is me, this is my sandwich, because also you understand you are in context, you are in a context of society. If you do not make a distinction between my sandwich, then the sandwich is society's sandwich. And if it is just one sandwich and there are 6 billion people in society, then that means that you would not get enough caloric energy for your own body. So it's highly efficacious to make these value distinctions. This is my body, and all this other stuff is not my body, and all this other stuff is potential food. And of this potential food, this specific food is my food. That is all totally appropriate. These distinctions have to be made. However, if we enlarge our perspective and enlarge what we identify with, like the boundaries of what we identify with, then we really come to a sense of non-duality and a sense of truth about who we really are. So these are appropriate stages of development. Just like in the womb, at a certain point you looked like a tadpole, then at a certain point you looked like a monkey, and some people are still kind of born with like monkey hair on their face, and then it falls out and then you become a human. So too do we go through these levels of separation, creating the ego, creating the time-based persona, saying, I'm this person and I'm not that person, and I'm this thing and I'm not that thing. And then turning it around and returning to the totality and unity and bringing everything together. So cells of the body, the cell membrane is a new development. Before the cell membrane was invented, there was just piles of goo, piles of cytoplasm and amino acids and chemicals that were shared generally from one area to the other, and the invention or creation of the cell membrane allowed for a sense of individuation. What processes are happening inside of the cell membrane are now different from the processes that are happening outside of the cell membrane. However, you and I, again, presuming that my audience are multicellular organisms here, it's emerged in time, we are made up of trillions of cells. We're not just one cell. So a one-celled organism, like an amoeba, I sometimes liken them to the crusty punk, the anarchist punk who refuses to participate in society and says, I'm an army of one. I'm out for number one. No one's going to tell me what to do, and I don't work with or for anyone. That's like an amoeba or a paramecium. One-celled organisms that do not work together, and they don't have specialization of cells. They are a one-man band, plays the drums, plays the bass, does the singing, does the harmonica all at once. And now let's contrast that with the multicellular organism, like you and I. We're made of collections of trillions of cells, all of whom work together, and this working together allows for individuation and specialization. So a heart cell looks different and acts different than a skin cell, and that is allowed to occur because of cells working together, and each cell develops its own expertise. My expertise is pumping blood. My expertise is being a boundary around the body. One cell doesn't have to do everything for the entire body. We have different cells doing different things, okay? Well, you, with your epidermis, are like an individual cell. All of the other people and living beings that you see, that you look around, they are also like individual cells. And yes, there is a very effective distinction to be made about what is happening biologically inside of the boundary of their epidermis as opposed to outside of the boundary of their epidermis. Like, inside of you, there's a particular state of biochemical reaction, a particular temperature, particular processes are happening. And those processes are not necessarily synonymous with or interchangeable with what's happening outside of you. Like, it could be 32 degrees outside of you, but inside of you it is somewhere around 98.6 degrees. This is metabolism and homeostasis. And we can also bring this around to a sense of ethics, because ethically we are responsible for what is within our own boundaries. I'm responsible for keeping my body temperature 98.6. I'm not responsible for keeping the entire environment 98.6. The environment can be what it is. Other living beings can have their own internal temperature. Dogs can be slightly warmer than me. Other people, reptiles can be slightly cooler than me. That's all fine because they're not me. This is making the distinction of me versus not me. And on a simple, practical level of being submerged in reality, we have to make these distinctions because I don't have enough energy in this biological format to keep the entire environment 98.6 degrees. That's not my job. I don't have that energy, and it's not my job. It's just my job to regulate and maintain this particular body. However, I am wise enough to know that this particular body and all of the other bodies that I see here around me are part of a larger entity, are part of a larger body. So inside of my body, my cells have cell membranes, and those membranes have receptors on them, and the receptors allow my cell to perceive the presence of other beings and chemicals, and to allow them to come inside of or interact inside of the cell membrane. So sometimes it's a hormone or something like that, a messenger that comes to the cell membrane and brings either a chemical or mechanical message or some nutrient for the cell. Sometimes it's a red blood cell that comes along with wonderful nutrition and oxygen, and then my cells are like, woohoo, I recognize you and I want you to take that stuff and put it inside of me. Sometimes my cells meet with and interact with a pathogen. That's a being that's not supposed to be inside of the body because it doesn't work for the totality of health. For example, an amoeba, the crusty punk that says, nobody tells me what to do, I'm an army of one and I work only for me and I'm looking out for number one. Amoebas, if they came to my cell membrane, would not be welcome guests because they don't wipe their feet and they're not nice. And same thing with viruses. The idea of pathogens is that they're beings that don't know how to work well with others. When you are an individuated being in your individuated epidermis, you look around at other people and you say, those beings are not me, not me, not me, and it's important to make those distinctions. If you expand and dilate your identity to identify with not only the planet, but also the sun and the stellar network of consciousness, basically the network that created all of the atoms that make physical reality and which emanate all of the light or pure consciousness that we utilize in order to experience the reality within which we are submerged. That stellar network is the entity, that is the real body. This is the conversation where one little cell in my body talks to another little cell in my body and says, hey, what do you think we're actually a part of? Can they even imagine a woman walking around named Aurora who's holding a microphone and flapping her moving mouth parts and doing a broadcast that other people will listen to? Hard for the little tiny cells, inside of my intestines or in my pancreas to even conceive of that. These are cells that have never seen light, cannot perceive light, but they are a part of my totality, okay? So when you meet and interact with another, what seems to be another person, you are interacting with another cell of a much larger body. And within my body, there are cells like my pancreas. My pancreas makes hormones called insulin that it sends out into the body. And individuated cells experience insulin coming up to their cell membrane and knocking on the door and saying, hey, we're insulin, we'd like to come inside. And the cell is like, how interesting. Where did you come from? You're just floating around the atmosphere out there. Because, of course, the cell thinks that everything outside of the cell membrane is, quote unquote, not me. And the hormones that come up to the cell membrane are mysteriously arriving from, quote unquote, out there. And you look around and you see all of these other cells that are, quote unquote, not me because they're not inside of my cellular membrane. However, all of those cells are part of the same organism. So, just as the bee creates a composite view of its environment based on all of the multiple tilings, and the hive mind is a community perception, an understanding based upon information gleaned from many different sources, so too is the totality of consciousness in on Earth, in the cosmos, is made from all of our individuated consciousnesses adding up to one mosaic of experience. So the words that are coming into you right now, the consciousness and the ideas that are coming into you right now, they seem to be coming from someone else. look, these are not your lips, your moving mouth parts making these sounds. It's not you doing it. It's some totally other person named Aurora. But this totally other person is a cell that is just like you, a cell inside of a much larger body, and the body is the stellar network. It's the stellar network that is making these mouth parts move and giving these words. However, it is not hijacking of my body in any way. The body came from the stellar network. The body is comprised of atoms that were made in the stars. All of my consciousness and neurological impulses come from the sun. All of the food that I have eaten here in this physical body come from the sun. And this morning, before I sat down to do this broadcast, I went and sat in a beautiful sunny field and ingested pure solar consciousness, in through my forehead. So in every single way, these impulses are nourishment that comes from a larger entity and is part of the metabolic homeostasis of a larger entity. By that I mean the maintaining the flow of energy. That is what life is of a larger being. In our body, we need to maintain the flow of energy. We need to maintain oxygen, blood flow, nourishment. This is metabolism. And we also need to maintain the flow of consciousness. That's neurological activity. If a person's breathing and their blood is flowing but they're not thinking, we don't say they're okay. We say they're brain dead, all right? So the flow of energy around the stellar network, it is a flow of consciousness energy. It is also physical food in that physical photons create they are captured by chloroplasts, they are created into starches and physical food. In that sense, we have, physical food that is being transmitted by the stars. However, don't get stuck in what is literal. In a very non-literal sense, the metabolism that is being maintained is an energetic metabolism. It is the flow of time. Stars, when they are born, when they coalesce, they have a certain amount of fuel or matter within them. That means they can emanate time only for a certain amount of time. It can be up to billions of years. It's such a long time frame that most humans can't even conceive of it. However, it's a limitation. It's like saying we wound up this clock, and then this clock is just going to go on for this amount of time based on how much mass is in the sun or in a star. So, flying rainbow lasagna. Flying rainbow lasagna is the solution to duality. It is a shape that combines the inside and the outside without breaking any rules. It would be breaking a rule of space-time and the cells of your body and having membranes and individuation for us to simply cut the membrane. The membrane that I'm talking about is the expanding membrane of space and time. So science describes this as expanding outward from the imagined or theoretical Big Bang, that zeroth dimension 13 billion years ago that spontaneously began to expand outward, creating the world of matter and creating the world of time that we experience. And if it's an ever-expanding bubble, what's inside of the bubble is the past. The surface of the bubble is the present moment now that we are standing on and occupying, and science doesn't even really recognize anything beyond that expanding horizon of the moment now. It would be the future. However, as I've described to you, the future would be the higher dimensional realm of the fifth dimension and higher, a place of uncollapsed waveforms, the future that hasn't been written yet, the musical score of the cosmos that exists as a state of potential but has not yet been made into music that can be played by an instrument or experienced with ears or, bathed in a concert hall, bathing people in a concert hall. In order to integrate the inside and the outside, it breaks the rules if we just cut that fabric. We're not allowed to cut it. Even black holes do not cut the fabric of space-time and consciousness. They stretch it. Black holes are the result of an infinite stretching of the fabric of space-time and consciousness. And science just calls it the fabric of space and time. I add in consciousness as another element because it has not yet been recognized by science. We're not allowed to cut the fabric. We are only allowed to stretch it infinitely. The flying rainbow lasagna is what happens when we place that stretchy beach ball of time in a higher dimensional state. We begin to vibrate it up and down within this higher dimensional context. That is called adding an additional degree of freedom. Back to the analogy of the little ant that isn't stuck on the surface of the paper anymore. All of a sudden, the ant has, quote-unquote, grown wings. Now it's a butterfly. Now it can fly to the opposite edge. Or we can keep the ant in one place and fold the opposite edge closer. This is all about time and consciousness. When you interact with the stars, the physical light that is hitting your eye is light that is ancient. It's light that was emanated millions of years ago, and it had to fly all the way across linear space and time, like the little ant that is stuck to the second dimensional paper and has to walk all the way across the paper. However, with flying rainbow lasagna, we can fold space and time and consciousness. We can add another dimension, and in so doing, add an additional degree of freedom. This means that you're not only limited by whom you can speak to in the present. You can now speak to consciousnesses from deep antiquity. You can speak to consciousnesses that theoretically haven't been born yet according to linear time. This is a big change. But it's not that big of a change when you understand that you're one cell within a much larger body. You are part of the continuum of consciousness of that much larger entity. The entity is a galactic entity. It is the size of our galaxy. Even our galaxy is only just one neuron of this much, much larger entity that is made up of all of the galaxies put together and all of the possible iterations within each galaxy. And that's what I mean when I say the cosmos. The cosmos is the fabric of reality. It's every single possible timeline woven together into a time tapestry. And we must understand that just like when you touch the surface of water, in one area the ripples spread outward and touch other areas, time interacts with itself in the same way. The being, the entity that we're a part of, it's time. What happens on one area of time spreads outward and has an impact on other areas of time. Our consciousness is not discrete. It's not something that is hermetically sealed in a box and doesn't interact with other consciousnesses. Our consciousness interacts with other consciousnesses. You're a musician and you're playing in a symphony. And the symphony is not just the musicians who are alive and on the planet and surrounding you at the same time that you're there. The other musicians are also ancestors, musicians whom have played millions of years ago. And their song is still programmed into your DNA. And the song is also your descendants and what you will become. And this is how we are starting to understand the birth of a new dimension, how we are starting to understand multidimensional consciousnesses. Because when you are interacting with someone or something that you think, that's an alien, or that's an extraterrestrial, or that's an extra-dimensional, what you're actually interacting with is another aspect of yourself that is coming from a different direction and moving at a vastly different rate. And this can also be, that same statement is truthful for anything, for interacting with a planarium, like a worm, interacting with a blue whale, interacting with a planet, interacting with a star. They are all you. It is all self. However, it's an aspect of self that is coming from a different direction and moving at a vastly different rate. So this goes back to you or I or someone in their crib as a tiny baby, figuring out me versus not me. Very effective thing to do because you need to make sure that you eat things that are not you can't just put your fist in your mouth and start chewing on it and eat it and swallow it down. Like, that's what we learn. We learn me versus not me. And those are effective tools for navigating the cosmos. However, at a certain point, in order to reach the next level of development or inner evolution, we need to expand or dilate our identity to identify with something much grander than just our skin or cellular membrane and the contents of what is inside of our cellular membrane. And we do this with the Flying Rainbow Lasagna. So I only have a few more minutes, but I'm just going to wrap it all up. Our bodies, the physical body, the physical human body, has always been this bridge between mentality and the expression of mentality. It's just that now the scale of how quickly things are expressed is speeding up. So health has always been an expression of your interior mental and consciousness state. Even to the point of believing, if you believe, I will fall down the stairs and break my leg, then you fall down the stairs and break your leg. Or if you believe, I will get a disease, like I will get cancer, or I will get heart disease, then you will get those things. However, they might take many years to develop, or a lifetime to develop. And this is traditionally what has been going on, that it's not necessarily a didactic situation or circumstance because the cause and effect are not close to one another in time. So if you have a thought early in your life and then 50 years later it leads to a cancerous tumor, it is difficult for you to learn. It is difficult for you to connect those two thoughts together. However, if you have a thought and then 2 months later develop a cancerous tumor, that's a lot easier to make the connection and say, I am thinking this and it is manifesting as this. P.S. This is a relatively new concept, getting away from genetic fatalism or the sense of deterministic genetic structure that science has given us since humans perceived DNA. That DNA is much more than just the mechanistic blueprint of your physical body. DNA is the bridge of light or consciousness between the world of potential possibilities and probabilities and what you're actually going to experience. And identical twins do not develop identical diseases. So this tells us that there is some aspect of mind and perception and consciousness that is determining the format of your body. What is in your genes is not necessarily what is manifested in your body, and the critical integument there is your mind or your consciousness. It's always been this way. The new change is the rate at which these things are manifested. So really, we're now in the world where things are manifesting instantaneously, and that allows us to learn in a much better way. It's a big topic. Please continue to join me as we prepare for the birth of a new dimension and the additional degrees of freedom that will give us. Thank you so much.